They thought betraying you would bring them relief, freedom, peace. But what they didn't know is that some actions follow you into silence, and betrayal is one of them. Before we go deeper, like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because messages like this aren't meant to be heard once. And if any part of this feels personal, leave a comment, not to explain, just to acknowledge. Now listen carefully. Betrayal doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's quiet. A choice made in secrecy, a line crossed when no one is watching, a loyalty exchanged for convenience. And often, the person who betrays convinces themselves of one thing, that I'll move on faster than you, that I'll sleep better, that this won't really affect me. But betrayal doesn't work like that. Because when you betray someone who trusted you, you don't just break a bond, you fracture your relationship with yourself. The first reality, they lose inner peace, not you. You may lose access to them. You may lose the version of the relationship you believed in, but they lose something deeper. They lose internal alignment. They now have to live with what they hid, what they justified, what they became in that moment. And no matter how confident they appear on the outside, there is a quiet unrest that follows them. Peace requires integrity, and betrayal is integrity broken in private. The second reality, guilt doesn't always look like regret. Here's something important to understand. Not everyone who betrays you will apologize. Not everyone will admit wrongdoing. Not everyone will look remorseful. Some people wear guilt as defensiveness. Some wear it as arrogance. Some bury it under distraction. They move faster. They talk louder. They pretend harder. Not because they're unbothered, but because stillness reminds them of what they did. And that's dangerous territory for someone who crossed their own values. You might have noticed this. They seem fine. They're smiling, posting, laughing. And for a moment, you wonder, did I mean anything at all? Was I that easy to discard? Why do they look so at peace? But here's the truth most people don't talk about. People often perform peace long before they feel it. And the louder the performance, the heavier the silence when they're alone. The third reality, betrayal creates internal noise. When someone betrays you, they don't just walk away, they carry. Justifications they repeat, stories they tell themselves, versions of the truth that protect their ego. But those stories require constant maintenance, because deep down, they know. They saw your loyalty, they felt your trust, and they chose differently. And that creates internal noise. Questions like, was I right? Would I do it again? What does this say about me? Peace doesn't survive that interrogation. The fourth reality, betrayal rewires how they see themselves. After betrayal, something subtle but permanent happens. They may still recognize their face in the mirror, but they don't fully recognize the person behind it. Because before betrayal, they could say, I'm loyal, I'm honest, I would never do something like that. After betrayal, those statements fracture. And now they live with a version of themselves that knows they crossed the line, even if they never admit it out loud. That internal shift is unsettling. They're no longer grounded in who they believe they were. And without that grounding, peace becomes unstable. The fifth reality, they fear being done to the way they did you. This part is rarely talked about. When someone betrays you, they become aware, painfully aware, of how betrayal works. They understand how easy it is to lie convincingly, how loyalty can be faked, how trust can be broken quietly. And now that knowledge turns inward. They become suspicious, guarded, hyper-aware, not because they're suddenly wise, but because they know what they themselves were capable of. Betrayal creates paranoia. Peace cannot live where trust has been corrupted. There's a moment that comes later, not during the chaos, not during the excitement, not during the justification, but after, when the distraction fades, when the adrenaline settles, when life becomes quiet again. And that's when they realize the betrayal didn't fix their emptiness. It didn't bring clarity. It didn't bring peace. It only removed someone who reflected their better self. And now that reflection is gone. The sixth reality, they must keep rewriting the story. To survive betrayal internally, they must do one thing constantly. Rewrite the narrative. They tell themselves, you were too sensitive. It wasn't that serious. you would have done the same. I had no choice. But stories that need repeating are fragile because truth doesn't need rehearsal. And every time they retell the story, they reinforce the fracture between who they are and who they want to believe they are. That tension never fully rests. The seventh reality: betrayal is a debt that demands payment. Not publicly, not socially, not immediately, but internally. Peace demands alignment. Alignment demands honesty. And honesty demands accountability. Until that debt is paid, through acknowledgement, remorse, and growth, peace remains conditional. They can distract themselves. They can deny it. They can outrun it. But silence always catches up. The final reality: peace returns to the honest, not the unharmed. One of the hardest truths to accept is this: pain does not block peace. Dishonesty does. You were hurt, yes, but you stayed aligned with who you are. You didn't have to become someone else to survive what happened. You didn't abandon your values. You didn't rewrite your truth to feel okay. And that matters more than you realize. Because peace is not the absence of pain. It is the absence of internal conflict. And that's why slowly, quietly, peace begins to return to you. There was a moment, subtle, almost unnoticeable, when you stopped waiting for them to explain. When you stopped reacting, when you stop asking questions, when you stop needing answers, something shifts. You didn't announce it. You didn't make a scene. You just let go. You realize that closure doesn't come from answers. It comes from acceptance. Acceptance that what happened was real. What you felt was valid. What you deserved was better. And in that acceptance, something softened inside you. They lose access to your emotional energy. And that's when they're left alone with the one thing they've been avoiding: themselves. Your silence becomes loud. Your healing becomes confronting. Your calm becomes unsettling. Not because you want it to be, but because it reveals a truth. You didn't need to betray yourself to survive. They did. You're not still hurting because they won. You're hurting because you were genuine. You didn't play games. You didn't act with hidden motives. You showed up honestly. And when honesty meets betrayal, the pain is sharp, but clean. Their pain is different. It's dull, lingering, unresolved. It hides, it deflects, it resists being named. And what resists healing lingers because it's rooted in self-betrayal. Your pain was honest. It surfaced. It asked to be felt. So you felt it. You grieved. You questioned. You processed. And because you allowed it, it began to release. This is important. What they did says nothing about your worth. It says everything about the distance between who they were and who they wanted to believe they were. You were not too trusting. You were not naive. You were open. And openness is not a flaw. The only mistake would have been staying where honesty was no longer safe. And you didn't, where your peace comes from now. Peace doesn't return all at once. It comes in moments. When you laugh without thinking about them, when your body relaxes again, when your mind no longer replays the past. It comes when your life no longer revolves around what was taken, but around what remains. And what remains is you, whole, aware, still capable of love, but wiser. This isn't about waiting for their downfall. It's about understanding this truth. You don't need to carry their consequences. You walked away with integrity intact, with your values unbroken, with your self-respect preserved. Your pain was clean, temporary, honest. Their unrest is complicated, lingering, self-inflicted. Here's something important. Your healing is uncomfortable for them, not because they want you miserable, but because your peace exposes their unrest. When you move on with clarity, without bitterness, without revenge, it silently asks a question they don't want to answer. If you're okay, why am I not? And that question lingers. You don't need to wish them suffering. Life already handles alignment. Your task is simpler and harder. Live well. Stay honest. Protect your peace. Because betrayal may take trust, but it can never take integrity unless you give it permission. And you didn't. If this message brought clarity, like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more grounded conversations like this. And if you're ready to release what no longer serves you, leave a comment, not to explain, not to relive, just to acknowledge you chose peace.